Child labor was a huge issue in the United States from around 1830 all the way until 1938. Child labor is the use of children in industry or business, especially when it is considered to be illegal or inhumane. Child labor has taken place in countries all over the world, but it was a huge issue in the United States for over 100 years. It was a long journey before child labor was put to a stop. Before 1832, child labor was not acknowledged like it should have been. It was not until 1832 that the New England Association of Farmers, Mechanics, and other working men officially condemned child labor. They were protesting in the streets to show that they felt child labor was something that needed to be stopped. This sign was one of the many that was asking for men, women, and children to be their slaves and work for them. Many people were willing to buy children starting at very young ages as long as they could get them for an extremely cheap price. In 1836, the first state child labor law was passed in Massachusetts. This law stated that children in Massachusetts under the age of 15 that are working in factories must be in school at least 3 months a year. Although it was only one state who passed this law, it was a huge step for the child labor law reformers. As you can see, before and even after passing this law, children of extremely young ages were working extreme jobs and extreme hours. In 1904, the National Child Labor Committee, which was a committee made up of people who were working to stop child labor, started an aggressive national campaign for federal child law reform. They were very adamant about putting up posters and spreading the word about child labor. They came up with different posters to try and get their word out and talk about their cause. In 1916, the first federal child labor law prohibits movements of goods across state lines if minimum age laws are violated. President Wilson signed this law and was a believer that child labor was not something that should be supported. In 1924, Congress passed a constitutional amendment giving the federal government authority to regulate child labor, but too few states ratified it and it never took effect. Leaders of the National Child Labor Committee would meet to discuss this new amendment and what it meant for child labor. In 1936, there is a new law that now states the United States will not purchase any goods that are made by underage children. Women and men were showing up from all over the world to this child labor meeting that was held in Washington, D.C. on May 20, 1937. At this meeting, they would show their support for Senator Barkley's bill, which prohibited them from buying goods made by underage children. Without the support, none of these laws would have been able to be passed. In 1938, the federal regulation of child labor got the Fair Labor Standards Act passed and was signed by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. This meant the federal government was finally regulating minimum ages of employment and hours for children. Although the struggle seemed to be over for a few years following, there was some time when these laws were not completely followed. All over the world, child labor is still a very serious issue and something that should not be allowed.